devastating to them. And these puberty blockers prevent that from happening. And when the child has reached a stage of maturity where everyone's confident that this is the right thing to do, then they can move from the puberty blockers to the female hormones. Or if they're decided that this is not a transgender child and that they've made a mistake, they can go through male puberty.
Right. But that almost never happens.
I think it's very, very rare
Yeah.
For that to happen. And from what I've observed, it is truly an exception when you see a trans person who has made a transition, as hard as that is, who regrets it and wants to go back. I know many trans people, myself included, and certainly Jerry, for example, gave up quite a bit when we transitioned. And despite what we've given up, I know for sure I wouldn't go back.
I'm sorry, Jerry Ann, did you have something to add there?
I do. Let me reference this letter again. One paragraph in particular speaks of this whole medical issue, and I mentioned Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, but specifically it says it protects the civil rights of people, including transgender youth, seeking non-discriminatory access to health care in a range of health programs and activities. Categorically refusing to provide treatment to a person based on their gender identity, for example, may constitute prohibited discrimination under Section 1557. As the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has stated, restricting an individual's ability to receive medically necessary care, including gender-affirming care, from their healthcare providers solely on the basis of their sex assigned at birth or their gender identity may also violate Section 1557.
Wow.
And Jerry, that letter is on the internet on the Justice Department's website. I've sent you and Kelly a link to that website. So that letter is the real deal. And
okay.
It's nice to see. I think it puts a lot of caregivers and programs in a catch-22 situation, kind of you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But the result of failure to comply with federal law is often the loss of federal funding. And the loss of federal funding is a real threat as opposed to some hypothetical threat that, maybe not, this is child abuse, and maybe not, some local DA would prosecute you. For the institutions who are involved in this, the hospitals, the doctors, the schools, this position announced by the Biden administration in the March 31 Kristen Clark letter is very powerful. It's very powerful. For the individual parent, it provides comfort, but it still exposes them to whatever, the state agencies might try to bring about based on allegations of child abuse. It doesn't actually protect the individual parents or the individual child, but it does penalize or shows how it could result in significant penalties for schools, universities, hospitals, and other programs to discriminate against transgender kids.
So if I understand what you're saying, the hospitals and health systems that have already suspended care of transgender youth in Texas, at least, may be feeling some pressure from this letter.
I'm not a specialist on hospital law or federal benefits law, but typically the way a lot of federal regulation works is it's based on money. It's based on either the ability to regulate commerce or federal funding or federal taxes. And So when you see a federal law that sets up a regulatory system and you're threatened with violating that regulatory system, there's probably a financial risk involved, because typically financial concerns are what give the federal government the right to take these actions.
Right. So more on that as it happens, but that is an encouraging turn of events, to be sure. We talked about the injunctions brought by, or lawsuits that were brought by ACLU and Lambda Legal against Abbott and the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. When your executive orders, for lack of a better term, go against the standard of care established by the American Psychological Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics, isn't that kind of a shaky ground to be standing on legally?
Well, it certainly is contradictory to the way state regulation traditionally works. Traditionally, state regulation follows medical best practices from, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Pediatric Association. Here we have an unusual situation where the state has, in one sense, departed from that standard of care. Now, interestingly, it doesn't have anything, there's nothing the Texas State Medical Board has announced that I'm aware of, or the Texas Nursing Board has announced that I'm aware of. And so the state agencies that regulate the practice of medicine or the practice of nursing, they don't seem to have taken a position on this issue. Rather, it's the Department of Child Protective Services, as prompted by the governor, hence the Attorney General, defending these policies in court, losing at the trial court, lost at the Court of Appeals, and now he's trying to get the Texas Supreme Court to take the case. And frankly, if the Texas Supreme Court takes the case, it's likely that they will reverse the lower courts, not because the lower courts are wrong, but because we've seen in the past, as in the Pigeon versus City of Houston case, where the Texas Supreme Court has been very vulnerable to political pressure and has given in to political pressure. In that Pigeon case, the Texas Supreme Court had originally denied review of a decision that permitted for same-sex healthcare benefits for City of Houston workers. And then after a hue and cry by Republican legislators, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and a series of amicus briefs from Republican officials and extremely conservative groups, the Texas Supreme Court did a complete reversal and flip-flopped on the issue and reversed the Court of Appeals and sent the case back to the trial court. And that's extremely unusual to have a motion for rehearing of a petition for review granted, and especially in a circumstance where you had a solid Court of Appeals ruling based on existing Supreme Court law. So that's a diversion, but that diversion is my way of saying that I don't have confidence that the Texas Supreme Court will stand up to the political pressure any more now than they did in the Pigeon case.
We keep coming back around to this being all about politics. Now, I don't know if the term standard of care is a legal term of art, but as a former healthcare provider, that term has a great deal of meaning. You do not deviate from a standard of care without having a very good reason.
And that's the standard for medical malpractice. So, in a sense, a doctor who is treating a transgender child, unless they withdraw from treating that child completely, is put in a rock and a hard place. And that is, do they violate the standard of care and withhold the gender affirming care that is recommended by the prevailing standards in the medical community? or do they give in to the fear that they could be found guilty of child abuse, potentially prosecuted, potentially lose their license? And that's why you're seeing hospitals close down their programs. Rather than try to walk that tightrope, hospitals are just closing their programs, as Texas Children's did, because it's you can't do this halfway without putting yourself either in violation of the standard of care or the Texas Department of Child Services pronouncements.
I want to say I can't believe it that we live in times when the caregivers of these kids are prevented from doing what they know is best. And make no mistake, all of the experts agree on the proper treatment for gender dysphoria. They're kept from doing that for political reasons. It boils my blood.
And it really is ironic to me that, the Republican Party, which is all about letting parents have choices and letting parents have authority over their children, such as with school voucher programs that they've advocated so that parents can choose what school their kids go to, that they are taking away the right of parents to consult with medical providers, to look at their kids, and to make the decision of what's best for their child. That's a huge contradiction from what we've seen in the past and what we've seen politically through the legislatures with these school voucher programs.
Okay, so we're all in agreement on how bad this is.
We've convinced ourselves. Three trans women have convinced themselves that this is a bad thing. So the choir has sung.
So what can our listeners do about this? What action can John Q. Public take?
I think the best action John Q. Public can take is at the ballot box, and that is in the next election to vote against candidates who support these policies, and instead to vote for candidates who say that they're going to oppose these policies. Another thing they can do if they don't have an opportunity to vote like that, or there are other things driving their ballot, is they can donate money to the ACLU and donate money to Lambda Legal. They can do that online very easily. And that money is enormously helpful and important to carrying on these legal fights, because even though they've got their own in-house counsel and they've got, I'm sure, help from other law firms that are doing this for free or pro bono, there's still a lot of expense involved and a lot of cost involved in pursuing any major lawsuit. So, make a donation. If you can't vote, for change, or you have issues in terms of voting for change, put your money where your mouth is and give to Lambda Legal or the ACLU.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this and your time. One thing I forgot to mention in introducing Danielle is that she is a movie star. Actually, she and Jerry Ann. Danielle, tell us about your recent project.
We did make a movie about my transition, and that was filmed over a period of at least 3 years, and it shows how we went from sort of a everything's rosy period in the beginning. In the beginning of my transition, I got a lot of support. I had ongoing business that I was going forward with, and just my family had stayed together, and everything seemed too good to be true. And turns out it was too good to be true, because within a year after I transitioned, I really had lost my business completely. I couldn't get hired by anyone to do anything. And it was really a shock for me that someone who had always been